Hello, my name is Claude Terrell Hankins. I'm a cybersecurity graduate student at Grand Canyon University. This presentation is Lab 4, Your Second Hat, Part 1. With this assignment, I utilized the Kali Linux, the Kioptrix 2, the Metasploitable 2 VMs to perform network enumerations and vulnerability scanning. The objective and goals of this presentation is to enumerate, identify vulnerabilities, other key information of the Kioptrix 2 VM with the use of tools like Nikto, OSWAP, and Nessus. I'm going to explain and explore vulnerabilities that could be exploited, discuss the vulnerabilities that are recognized, and discuss the possible and legal ethical issues surrounding vulnerabilities. After doing the ifconfig command to determine my virtual machines, I came up with the two that I had running, which were the Kioptrix 2. It's 192.168.216.8, and the Metasploitable 2, which was 192.168.216.6, and showed all the open ports and all the possibilities that could be vulnerable and exploited. After determining my targeted machine that we're going to use for this presentation, which was the Kioptrix 2, I loaded this into the web browser on the Firefox web search, and it came up with this system administrative login page. Being able to access this page also showed me that I had internet access as well. With this part of the presentation, I was able to do an Nmap operating system scan. This is a screenshot showing the information that came about from doing the command of sudo nmap switch o 192.168.216.8. It just basically shows detailed information about the system and other information that could be possibly exploited later. With this part of the presentation, I was able to do an intrusive Nmap scan with port details. It just basically gives information about all of the open ports by giving the command of nmap switch a.192.168.216.8. I was able to get more detailed information about the open ports, and two that stood out to me was port 631, its potentially risky methods, and port 3306. It has a MySQL unauthorized notation with that port that could be possibly exploited later. Here are three screenshots of a Nmap vulnerability script scan that I ran. It basically shows the open ports and more detailed information. By running this command, I was able to gain information about the vulnerabilities that could be utilized and more information in the type of level risk that each one possesses. This is a comparison, Nikto versus OSWAP Zap, two scanners that I used for this assignment. Both are open source tools. Nikto is designed to deal with web servers. OSWAP Zap, it basically interacts with web applications. The primary objective of both NICTO is to scan web servers and find outdated software, dangerous scripts, and other vulnerabilities. OSWAP ZAP is designed to find vulnerabilities within web applications, such as cross-site scripting and authentication issues. After doing a NICTO scan on the Kioptrix 2, I ran the command NICTO switch H 192.168.216.8, and this is a screenshot of what came up. It basically targeted port 80. It was tested, shows vulnerabilities that are associated with the port. It was things like outdated software, SQL injection information, all possible information that could be exploited or used vulnerabilities. Like the NICTO scan that was ran, the OSWAP scan results were basically almost identical, showing the vulnerabilities and the ratings to give a clear indication of what could possibly go wrong with the system, the Kioptrix 2 system. The third vulnerability scanning tool that I used for this assignment was Nessus. This first screenshot, it's a basic network scan of the Kioptrix 2 virtual machine. It shows a list of possible vulnerabilities and how they're rated from critical to low. This second screenshot is a more detailed look at the Nessus dashboard. It shows a vulnerability rating score, the risk level, the actual vulnerability that could put the VM in the line of an attack. This is another portion of the Nessus vulnerability scan that was done on the Kioptrix 2 virtual machine. It shows the vulnerability ratings. It could be from critical, high, medium, or low. It shows the vulnerability score. It shows the vulnerability priority rating, which is how you could put these vulnerabilities in order from pressing to not major at all. You just decide, or how you could tackle them. Here's a more detailed look at the vulnerabilities that was found from the Nessus scan. Over the next few pages of this presentation, there's a breakdown of a total of 10 vulnerabilities that were found, some critical, some high, some medium. But basically, vulnerability 1, it had a critical level. It had a CVSS score of 10. And the reason was the PHP was unsupported and the version was no longer supported for the system. It recommended an upgrade of the version to be supported to something newer. This second vulnerability, the version of PHP on the remote host was outdated, and the issues included buffer overflow and heap corruption. And it also recommended that it be upgraded to a newer version of PHP. With vulnerabilities 3 and 4, vulnerability 3 had a rating of high with a CVSS score of 9.3, and the reason was the PHP was outdated, and also buffer overflow exists in the SSCANF function, and it recommends that it be upgraded to a newer version. Vulnerability 4 had a rating of high with a score of 7.5. This one had a high priority. The version of PHP was outdated, there was an error in the file that could allow remote attackers to obtain the PHP source code, and this vulnerability is exploitable. It recommends it being upgraded to a newer version. Like the other vulnerabilities on this scan, um, vulnerabilities 5 and 6 also had versions of PHP that were outdated. Vulnerability 5 had a rating of high with a score of 7.5. The issues included buffer overflow and arbitrary code execution, and recommended that the version be upgraded to a newer version. Vulnerability 6 had a rating of medium with a score of 6.8. It had PHP version outdated, possible SQL injection attacks, corrupted files not properly validated, and recommended that the version of PHP be upgraded. Vulnerability number 7 of this Nessus scan had a rating of medium with a score of 6.8. The PHP version was outdated. It's also had possible bypass to the safe mode, and an attacker could upload files using post requests. Vulnerability 8 had a rating of medium with a score of 6.4. Like the others, PHP was outdated, directory paths not ending, and possible bypass to open files was also found. Vulnerability scan number 9 had a rating of medium with a score of 5.4, and the reasons were outdated PHP, and it was vulnerable to denial of service attacks. And it also noted that attackers can trigger an infinite loop when get image size is called. The recommended fix to this vulnerability was to upgrade to a newer version of PHP. Vulnerability scan number 10 was medium with a score of 5.3. The reasons were PHP running on remote web server, email header injection vulnerability. Remote attacker can gain full control of email header based off of those issues, and recommended that the version of PHP be upgraded. Here's a detailed look at cross-site request forgery. This is an attack that forces end users to execute unwanted actions on a web application. It exploits implicit authentication processes. And it's one common vulnerability of this is the use of cookies or browser stored authentication credentials. Here's a detailed look at cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting occurs when attackers or malicious users can manipulate a website or web application to return malicious JavaScript to users. Cross-site scripting allows attackers to inject and execute malicious client-side scripts in the browser of users who visit compromised web pages. The primary cause is insufficient input validation, where users' input are included in pages without proper checks. With the flaw hypothesis methodology of this assignment, we look at port 80 that was done during the NICTO scan, and it noted that the outdated Apache HTTP server version was present, but there's possible input validation flaws. The HTTP trace method is active, but the host is vulnerable to cross-site tracing. This flaw would allow attackers to exfiltrate data from a system. The vulnerability analysis of this presentation came from the NICTO scan that was done. Mostly all of the vulnerabilities that were found had outdated PHP versions. And the reasons why, there were insecure coding methods, security misconfigurations, outdated software, and broken access control, etc. This portion of the presentation, we're going to look at the legal, ethical, and industry considerations for vulnerability disclosure. The legal side of things, the Federal Contractor Cybersecurity Vulnerability Reduction Act was passed to help with this. And most of the legal framework that's attached to vulnerabilities was implemented in 1984. You have the CFAA and the Digital Millennial Copyright Act in 1998. The ethical standards include an emphasis on minimizing harm and building trust within cybersecurity. As far as the industry standards, this is the practical framework set forth in the industry that provides guidelines accepting managing vulnerability situations. The NIST and the CISA are the leading industry leaders of this matter. My thoughts on this issue, I feel that the legal, ethical, and industry standards should set the tone for disclosure. In my opinion, if a vulnerability is going to cause harm to the public, they should know what's going on. Here are a list of references I used for this presentation. This concludes my presentation on network enumeration and vulnerability scanning of the Kioptrix 2 virtual machine. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.